Thank you for tuning into Stampscaping 101. This is a extremely textured scene here, maybe the most textured scene I've ever done in my life. But anyways, this is a really simple composition here of 3 stamps, okay? It's the Milky Way and these 2 trees in the form of spruce tree large and the pine tree, okay? Just over the background of a Milky Way stamp. But what I've done with that Milky Way, because it's a textured design already, is I've really tried to kind of extend this kind of textured background, I don't know, to the maximum that I've ever taken it to. And I've used a lot of these other types of pens, the paint pen, kind of a fluorescent gel pen, a little bit of a metallic pen, these kind of jelly roll moonlight pens, and a white paint pen. But what I've also done is I've used a lot of the bleed proof white in a splatter paint application and layered again with some additional color dots, but also the white marks of kind of a brushed application of the bleed proof white, okay, over the trees, and with some additional textures up in that night sky. So I don't know, I just really wanted to push things kind of to a maximum end result, seeing where it would take me. You can see all these little colored dots up there. As I say in the video, it reminds me of like confetti or something like that. But just wanted to see where, I don't know, where I could take what I could possibly do to a background. I don't know if I've maximized it or not. Maybe going a little bit darker in there and maybe adding some, more vibrant colors in the background might look interesting. But in terms of a textural statement, I don't know if I can really go any further than this, just in terms of everything that was applied to this. It was time to, I don't know, do a little experiment like that for me, just in terms of my own aesthetics. I like textured backgrounds and, I don't know, varied looking marks on a scene. And I don't know, I think I've achieved it with this one right here. I don't know. And again, I really need to do more kind of brushed applications of things, to finish off a scene, because I add a lot to these trees down here, and I like that varied mark. And with a paintbrush, as opposed to just using kind of a gel pen all the time, I can go for a little bit of a varied line in terms of thick and thin, with a paintbrush that you just can't achieve with a, steel, set ball. I mean, there's certain things you can do this with this one, but I don't know. It's kind of fun to play around with a little bit of that white, bleed-proof white on there too sometimes. So I don't know. I'll have to try to employ some of these techniques that I learned, I don't know, in this scene right here tonight, into some other scenes, and we'll see where that takes me in terms of some future scenes. It's never too late to kind of pick up other techniques. As I was mentioning to someone today, in many ways, I've been doing scenes for a long time, but I really feel like I'm just scratching the surface, or scenic stamping in general. I think we've all kind of just scratched the surface on what can be done with our stamps out there. There's so many other techniques to be explored, and I don't know, techniques to be applied. So I don't know, always kind of learning new things or trying to learn new things, and when I get locked into a certain technique and refining it, it's time to kind of push it even more. So in this one, I don't know, I probably added, I don't know, 5 times as many dots, colored dots, as I normally would. And just layering things like the bleed-proof white splatter painting technique, and just take it, I've done it on, other scenes in the past, but just kind of taking it more into an extreme application in one stamp. It doesn't look so extreme like that, but like I said, there's a lot of little textures in here. And I think when I spray this off too, I'm not spraying it off quite yet because this ink down here is really wet. I think it'll make the background even more deep and saturated, and the dots that have been applied with these types of markers and pens will, they'll stand out even more. So anyways, if you watch this video, I hope you enjoy it, and I don't know, maybe that's not the word, when you watch a scene being, I don't know, 1,000 dots being applied to a scene. I don't know how visually engaging that might be, but I hope you enjoy it, I should say. So anyways, thanks for tuning in, and for watching the Stampscapes video channel. Okay, I've been kind of organizing my studio and office of late. I haven't done too much stamping this past week, but I was looking at some night photography, kind of some, not really time-lapse, but long exposure photography. And I love that type of look where you get this really clear, visuals of the Milky Way through long exposures with cameras and such. And that kind of got me thinking that I wanted to do something, I don't know, inspired by that. I wouldn't say similar to that. So I'm going to do kind of an easy composition here in terms of the structure of this scene. Maybe I'll do it vertical. And I'll kind of gear it around these 3 images. And I want to do this in really, I'm going to be going for some really hot, explosive looking tones, okay? We'll see what that turns out like. I thought I would use a magenta. This is the number 20 from Marvy. Super, super bright color. I don't use it all too often just because it is just so kind of stunningly bright. In terms of the intensity of the excuse me, that particular hue. And let's see where that goes. You can use various tones with it. Magenta goes really well with, of course, it's kind of analogous colors next to it on the color wheel, such as reds and whatnot, but it also looks pretty good with browns. But let's just mix some colors up and see what we come up with here. Okay, that was a magenta, this is a plum. And you notice I'm just kind of tapping around some different tones. That's one of the things that's kind of nice about these Marvy pads. You can just kind of grab them and tap them out like that. I don't use plum too much either. I notice most of my really bright, dark, bright colors. Remember, bright isn't the same as light. Bright is the intensity, whereas light is the relative, light darkness of something. But yeah, I don't use too much of these darker tones, so I don't know. I might, gosh, I don't know if I've ever re-inked something like a magenta. I'm re-inking all my really light tones all the time because I've seen any of these videos of mine. I'm usually laying down a big, thick layer of the lightest colors, and when I get to the darker ones, it's usually more around kind of the perimeter of a scene where you see it a lot. But anyways, what I did was I worked dark, and then I have this number 9 pink pen, brush marker, and I'm just kind of going around and coloring certain areas here and there. I'm kind of doing it not in terms of a straight line, but you notice I'm kind of blending out a little bit. So I hope I get a little bit of a blend in the impression. Okay, I never know what I'm going to get when I do that, but we'll see. Just because it just depends how wet your pads are and how wet your pen is, you know, will determine how much of one ink gets applied. And like if this one's kind of dry, it's going to be removing a lot of the ink because it's going to be somewhat absorbent. So, and because I can't necessarily see the color, you know, what it looks like on the, you know, piece of red rubber, you know, we never know what we're going to get, which can be a good thing too. All right, so we have a lot of variation there, right? You can see some of that magenta, where it's kind of a little bit more reddish. That's probably the plum, and I don't know, I don't really see too much pink. Probably, okay, the pink is probably where that lighter tone is, right here, as opposed to this darker violet. So you can see that where that pink influenced that area. So the pink was obviously mixing with some of the magenta and just giving it a bit of a lighter hue, or a lighter version of that. We'll go for, I think one more impression should do it, but we'll see. Okay, let me go through something similar. That was the magenta. Put down some of the plum. The plum kind of reminds me of, yeah, this one right here. This is wine. So anything like that, if you want to, if you're kind of stamping along here with this. Here comes some of the pink. Let me see if I can remove off some more of that color this time. See, I'm kind of wiping that like that. It's kind of getting into the pen a little bit more. Okay. We'll see what we get here. All right. See this Milky Way? See this kind of dominant, kind of, I don't know, like a Z shape or something? It's right here, okay? And what I like to do is I like to just kind of match that up. I mean, you could go whichever way, and, you know, it'll end up, stars will be stars, but all right, now see, I'm going to overlap that first impression about a 1/4 inch into this one. All right. People see scenic stamping, a lot of times they think it's hard, but, you know, this is kind of a genre and grouping of a type of sibling imagery where it's kind of anti-difficult because you don't have to mask things off. I mean, how many times do you really have to use a stamp positioner? You know, it's almost none with scenic stamping because overlapping helps the blending process, right? So you always want it to be seamless, so overlapping of imagery, overlapping of colors, not worrying about a real heavy-duty positioning and placement. You know, it's kind of the opposite of what you would call kind of, you know, some of the more tedious processes of stamping. Okay, going in here. Alright, now we have this area over here that needs to be filled, right? So I'll just go in here like this. I'll change the angle a little bit because it's not like placing bricks in here. You're not trying to get this angle right in there. That's when it would start to show kind of, you know, the edges. But if you just kind of overlap things, see, I'm overlapping this whole area like kind of right here all of that by coming in like that. Okay? Alright, see that? And, okay, I wasn't going to do that, but might as well just go for one more impression. I'm not going to bother with the blend, but we'll go with something like this, I would say. See, I'm coming in, I don't know, like a ½ inch into it, you know, so there's a lot of leadway. There's not like some kind of like small window of opportunity in terms of, you know, getting things positioned perfectly. And this is just the impressions, you know, when you get around to, you know, blending in extra colors, you know, that's when everything just kind of blends together anyway. So if you don't get it in the impressions themselves, you'll get the blending in the coloring or the toning or whatever media you happen to be using. You just kind of blend everything together with universal tones. Okay, so anyways, we have this right here. It just looks like pattern now, you know, or texture, which is fine, but let's try to work with this now and have this represent kind of lighting and kind of a night sky. So in general, I'll leave that kind of that band there a little bit lighter, and kind of the areas out here, from here on, will get incrementally darker as it moves off the edge of the page. So the idea here, bring in some light tones into it like this, and then as I use some darker tones, I use those darker tones a little bit more on the perimeter, and darker yet will just kind of be like that. So it'll be lighter tones come in here, medium tones, darker tones, roughly, okay? Alright, now let's see. What color should I start off with? I'm tempted to go through some blues and pinks and purples. That's what I always do. I want to go a little bit more extreme, I think, in terms of maybe the hue. You know, it might be kind of interesting in here just to go with a little bit more of a wild color scheme is maybe some green or something like that. Blues and greens. Not like a pine green, but like a pale green or something of that sort. I'm not sure. But, hey, sometimes you just gotta try some things. Yeah. Mix it up a little bit. Experiment. Maybe you come up with something interesting. I don't know. Alright. Boy, I haven't used this in a while. This is there's still a little bit of ink on here. Okay. So, let's start off with a blue, because blue is kind of universal to purples and greens, so I'll have that. I just won't go just straight green. We'll need a little bit of a transition somewhere. And I'm not talking about green's just going to be everywhere. I'm talking about maybe a hint of it somewhere. So, let's play around with a little bit of Memento. Summer Sky. Okay. And we're starting light, okay? Now, one of the things about kind of the process is if you go really dark, it can be a little bit more precarious. You know, if I just went like this with a really dark tone on here, I'd get the shapes of this little oval leafy shape everywhere, right? But if you start with a lighter tone, like this, okay, Summer Sky, this is not a dry pad, it just happens to be a very light value of blue, okay? That's why I always do that. It's kind of like a secret weapon in terms of if you're teaching workshops or something like that, because it gets people into kind of the swing of things in terms of how much ink they should apply, but it's done in a incremental process because this ink, the beginning ink is so light. So people really have to apply quite a bit, and that's what you want. You want large saturations of it. But this is also where this entire process becomes very easy. I mean, I can use the most horrific technique of application of this ink possible. I can go like this, and I can just go like this. And it's not any big deal, right? I mean, don't do that, but, you know, that's just to show you that you can if you start light. Now, that you don't always have to, but these kind of layers of saturation of transparent colors in the end result are the things that kind of gives this glossy cardstock and transparent inks that kind of glowing finish, you know. A very rich, deep surface is through the use of layered tones of ink, layered values, different hue, different intensities sometimes. Okay, so that is the summer sky. Not a huge difference, but you can kind of see where I've laid some of that blue in here. I've left some of it, you know, the white of the page, but you can see a little tinge of blue out there, right? This is like pure white right here. So you can see right around here the difference. So that's, you know, what's been applied. Okay? So if you start light with something like summer sky, if you have the Adirondack lights, the aqua would be a perfect one for that. I haven't used it before. I keep mentioning this color. I need to get it, but that tumbled glass distress ink would probably be a good one. Alright, now this is Caribbean blue, or Caribbean blue, whatever. This is quite a bit darker in terms of value. It's not a dark hue, but it's quite a bit darker than that previous color, so kind of, you know, if you want to retain some of that light of the page, then just don't tone it out. This is where everyone kind of says, if anyone has a problem with lighting, it's because they don't kind of change up between each color, or at least with their darker tones, medium darker tones. They tone everything out, okay? So just remember, you just do less work the darker you go, okay? I mean, you don't apply so much. And if you want that star to remain light, or if it was a sun or a moon, if you don't want it to get toned down, just don't go over it, you know? And that's where you will define light and shade within a scene, right? This one isn't, you know, I'm not going to work around every little dot in this scene, you know, of course, in terms of doing the Milky Way, but, you know, if you're working around a sun or a moon or something like that, you know, just avoid it. And that way you'll get your lighting scheme in a scene. So lighting is just a matter of, when you're starting off with a white piece of paper, lighting is just a matter of not toning out every light area within a scene. It's just selective shading, in other words. And selective shading, to me, is easier than complete shading because you're not toning everything out, you know, applying the same amount of ink everywhere within a scene. And, you know, this, just like any landscape, there is really no right or wrong, you know, about what you leave light. You know, was it wrong that I kept that light right there and toned out that star, or should I leave that star light and should I have toned out that star? You know what I mean? That doesn't matter. But I think it looks better just to kind of oscillate your light and shadow a little bit, you know. Have areas, you know, light, dark, light, dark, light, light. That's better than just light in the middle and dark on the edge, okay? So mix it up a little bit, you know, and especially with these lighter tones, and it's very easy to do. And it's very easy to color in the whole thing too, I know that, but just, you know, hold the card at arm's distance, you know, and take a look at it every now and then. So it's looking a little bit more celestial, though, isn't it, in terms of, like, deep space? And this is what, I think that this is the second color that we've used so far, so just 2 tones, and, you know, we're kind of getting there. Alright, that blue is kind of nice. Let's try a little bit of that green now. I tell you what, I usually go with something more like this. Let me try this. Yellow-green. It's kind of extreme, right? I don't know. Let me see. It sure doesn't look like kind of something, anything within that color scheme does it, but, well, we're here to learn, so, and when I say we're, I'm talking about me. We'll see how it goes. Okay, now see, I'm just kind of blotting it off a little bit before I go in there. I'll bring it into some of that blue. But it sure stands out, doesn't it? See that right there? Alright, I think I'm fairly safe. I think it looks okay. I'll try to get just a tinge of it here and there. Okay, see that right there? Can you tell that's a little bit warmer? Alright, actually it seems to be kind of harmonizing with the background tones a little bit better than I thought it would. Now see, because I'm taking off a lot of ink here. See, I'm blotting it off a lot, so it's more of a dry brush application of it. So it's very pale, alright? So I don't get too much of a surprise. It would be great if it was a unexpected, nice surprise, but I don't want to get any bad surprises, in other words. Okay, that looks maybe a little bit right here, huh? Alright, I'm feeling a little bit more confident with it, so I'm adding it in a few other areas. It's just, there's this one video that I did, I can't remember the name, but it's kind of some tweaks. What this is doing is it's adding one additional tone into a scene. Now in this case it's a warm tone. So what we've done is we've really increased the temperature range of this given scene. It was totally cool tones. But when you go in with something like that yellow, what we've done is we've introduced a warm tone into it. So we've taken like a whole cool color spectrum and we've just expanded it completely into warm tones. It's not, most of these tones here are cool. The magenta is a little bit more neutral, but it's mostly cool. So we've pushed it into an actual warm tone, and that's something that was, you know, it's different for the scene now. So we've even increased that kind of the visual vocabulary within this scene. All right, this is pale green now, so I'm adding a little bit more of that greenish, just straight green tone into it. All right. So now I'm going into another hue. All right, so we've added that yellow-green. It looked more yellow to me though, but introducing this hue, green, into it now. it's increasing the range of hue within the scene now too, okay? I mean, it's kind of what I'm going after. When I say that, I don't really have anything super specific in mind. It's just kind of a general notion of kind of what I want this scene to look like. Okay, like I said, I was thinking I want jeweled, real jeweled tones, you know, like a, I don't know, something really, really vibrant and bright. Not light, but bright again, you know, in terms of the intensity. Because what I'm going to do on this is, with those trees that I showed you in the beginning, I'm just going to have those in the foreground in silhouette, so they'll be nice and dark. So it's really not going to be about those trees at all. I just want those trees in a dark hue to really pop the, you know, what's going on in the sky in the background. Okay, now this is at a time where, again, you know, this is called light blue. It's really more of a medium blue. This is really where you have to be conscious of where you're placing your ink. You don't want to tone out all of your lighter elements in the scene that you want to remain light, okay? If you want to create kind of a lighting scheme, right? You just have to be careful about, like, this area in here especially, so don't go over it, okay? Just stay on the perimeter a little bit longer, and, you know, you can put this color wherever you want it to go. If I do bring in some of this blue in here, it's going to be, you know, in a very light version of it, okay? So, every time I re-ink this, what you'll find is I'm usually starting it on the outside edge. And then, you know, I'll tap some tones into there, and then I'll utilize kind of the drier version of this color, whatever color I'm working with, in those lighter areas, okay? If I do, I mean, sometimes I'll just stay away from it altogether. Okay, now the perimeter is going to become quite saturated with ink, and that's what I want. I want there to be a kind of a nice vignette framing of dark tones around the perimeter, right? Okay, that was the light blue. This is, I think this is number 3. They put a sticker over this. I sent this pad into this magazine, and actually I can't see what that is. It's probably number 3 blue, which is like a navy blue. It would be a Danube blue if you have a Memento ink. If you have Adirondack pads, not the Adirondack lights, but the Adirondack, there was this one pad called Denim. That was a really good dark blue. I don't know, what are some other ink pads out there with a really dark blue? Most lines have a dark blue of some sort. Okay, so this is really kind of framing this off now. And that dark blue. Looks a little crazy, I know, but I'm just going to say that's kind of what we're going after. Alright, now, I almost kind of forgot. Let me try something with the magenta, okay? I mean, since this is the color that I stamped, you know, the imagery in, it would stand to reason that I would blend in with that. Now see, I'm putting this magenta over the dark blue, and it's not as if I'm going to put the magenta over the dark blue and it's going to look magenta, okay, because these are, again, these are transparent colors, so the colors underneath are going to affect what you see on the surface here. To me, it just looks more, I don't know, it almost looks like a darker blue to me. Alright. Or violet, I guess, where magenta and blue kind of mix in a way. Not physically mixed, but optically mixed, just from the overlap. Boy, that is getting really dark. Sometimes people ask me, you can see that kind of ink on my finger there, but what I find is I'm probably using more of my nails than the pad of my hand to hold the card down. There was this like pad stamping kind of contraption one time. It was like a lazy Susan that you put your scene onto or whatever. Not scene, it wasn't landscape stamping, but and you kind of spun it around. And someone asked me if I had that or something one time. I said, well, I don't know, I just kind of, turn it around like that. Rather than having the contraption that I'm, going to have to turn it with, I just say, well, I just kind of go like that. Okay, let's see here. That was magenta. Okay, now this is Prussian blue. I could use plum, or I don't know, plum or wine. Let me try this. I was going to say I don't think it's going to look any different because it's already darker than that color. Well, I don't know. Actually, that does look a little bit darker, doesn't it? It's probably because this pad is so juicy. This pad is probably, I don't know, 15 years old, maybe. It's probably never been re-inked. And it is super, super moist. I mean, look at that. That's really quite wet. Okay, Prussian blue. Really, really fantastic blue. It's dark blue, almost black, I would say. If there's a darker blue out there on the market, I've never seen it. I love those colors, though. I love different hue that are so dark. They're just kind of like a few percentage points away from black. Like, I would love it if there was I don't know, some sort of violet, maybe a super dark violet, maybe green or a blue-green, something like that would be kind of nice. I mean, we can kind of achieve that through color blends, like a green overlapped and, like a Prussian blue or something like that, but I don't know, it wouldn't hurt to have it just kind of in a pad form in itself, right? Too. Okay, so we have this. Which way's up and which way's down, I don't know. I think I'm leaning towards that. I think this is up and this is down. No. That would look good too. I'm thinking about these trees right here in the foreground. Okay, now let's see here. I was thinking about this bleed-proof white on here. And you can see I'm still thinking about it, but what I'm thinking about is I'm thinking about putting some texture back in that sky. That's kind of more of a random texture. But I'm not sure, because here's what, I still have to stamp out my trees in the foreground, and I want them to be nice and stark black. But if I do that, I don't know if I'm going to want the texture of the bleed-proof white on here. Okay, I'll do it. I'll go for the bleed-proof white instead of just stamping out my trees in like a black Marvy ink. I'll use a VersaFine black pigment ink on here instead. And we'll see how that goes. Okay, so that being said, I'm going to use the bleed-proof white. I need to pause here and go get my splatter brushes. Okay, I have my handy, real high-tech splatter brushing tool. It's an old toothbrush, right? And I have my bleed-proof white. It tends to kind of, you know, get a little bit dried out. So you reconstitute it with a little bit of water, all right? And you get it the consistency that you want. Just something that's not too thin, something that's not too thick, all right? There's no kind of set for, I'll use my scratch knife wand here to kind of mix it up a little bit. Okay, for those that don't know, the Dr. Martens Bleed-Proof White is a very, very super opaque white watercolor paint. Alright? With a lot of other paints, if you put it on top of something like a dye-based inks, what happens is that the paint, some of the colors from the dye-based ink would leach into the wet watercolor, and you would probably get some kind of, you know, colored version of paint, okay? But this is bleed-proof white, so when you apply it, it just stays stark white, okay? Let me see. I don't know why I have two toothbrushes here. I'm checking for stiffness. This one seems a little bit more stiff. This one seems softer. Maybe I'll go for... yeah, which one do I want? I'm thinking the stiffer one might give me a little bit more variation, where the softer one will give me kind of a more misty thing. I think I want to go for variation here, so... kind of get a blob right there. On a couple videos back, I got a big blob of that paint, so I'm going to make sure that or try to make sure that I don't have like a big blob in there that's going to drip out. So, alright. I kind of dunked it in there and then I'm just kind of wiping it off like this. Alright. Alright, I'm just going to go for it here. Let's see what we get. move things out of the way here, because maybe I should, here, I'll show you what I'm doing here. I'm going to spread out some of my paper here, because it does tend to, you know, it is, you know, the technique is splattering, so it does kind of splatter. You know, you can control it to a certain degree, and it's, you know, it's not going to go all over the place, but I don't know, there's probably going to be a little bit of a radius of ink around. Okay. Alright, so I think I'm all set here. Okay, let's actually inadvertently kind of spread some there already, but okay, this is what I'm doing here. I'm kind of pulling it back like that, and it's springing out like this, okay? Can you see that right there? Yeah. Okay, see all around up here. One of the things with those long exposure shots of the night sky is that, especially with these days, with the resolution of digital cameras getting better and better all the time, you really see tons of stars in a, I don't know, whatever it is, 30-second exposure or something like that, whatever they're doing. They're really quite amazing to look at. Now, do you need to do this? You know, no. It's just giving me a little bit more of a kind of a random texture, as you can see. I mean, there are certain things you can do, you know, with the gel pen or something like that, and adding dots, but, you know, this is adding some real fine ones. There's larger ones, you know, twice the size. None of them are really huge, but I don't know. It's just, it makes for some kind of a fun texture like that. And it is another texture, so it is another layer that's been applied, which I like. I don't know. I like that element of randomness too. Okay. Alright, so I need to go wash off my thumb. So yeah, that's what it ends up looking like on your brush. Alright. So let me go do that. Okay, this is coming around. Washed off my thumb. Okay, now the next step that I'm going to do, by the way, I'm just kind of making this up as I go. This isn't like some kind of defined technique or something like that, but I think what I'm going to do, knowing that I'm going to be stamping in some trees here in black, I think I'm going to actually use a little bit of black around the edges, and what that's going to do is it's going to blacken in a lot of these stars that got put out there, but, you know, so be it. So I'm just going to do that with some black ink. Just your dye-based black ink, okay? And I'll start toning in there. See how that goes one step darker? And that was also in my kind of little tweaks video of things that you can do to a scene just to kind of push it one step further in terms of possible resolution. See, what you do when you're doing something like that, if you're taking the edges one step darker, what you're doing is you're making interior, or anything that's lighter than it, one step lighter, okay, because it's contrast that we're working with. We're not working with lights or anything like that in stamping. We're just working with the white of the card. So what is light and what's dark is relative. It just, you know, visually it just depends on kind of what else is in there. Okay, so if part of the scene is a little bit darker, what you'll make is the things that are lighter a little bit lighter. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, we're not working with little light bulbs in the back of the scene or something like that, so that's what I like to do. I like to, usually, not every time, like if it's a super foggy scene or something like that, you know, where everything's illuminated, but a lot of times I like to have a full value scale. Okay? Some scenes get a little bit darker than others. Some, you know, the darkness is kind of in a small area. I would say 90, it's probably more than 90% of my scenes, the darkest areas are just the four corners. You know, just to create kind of a vignette look. It's just kind of, and what that does is it kind of contains the composition. It says that even though this is, you know, something like this is depicting a night sky or something like that in a scene, it says that when you kind of contain things through the use of a darker perimeter like that, it kind of makes anything within those, you know, that space, its own world. It tends to focus the viewer's attention, you know. It keeps it within the scene. It's the same thing with portrait photography, you know, how they have it in this darker border around someone. It's, you know, so, you know, all the attention goes to the subject of that photo. Okay, it's like yearbook photos or something like that. Studio photography, I should say. Okay. See how that's looking? That's the black, right? And see how I'm kind of always kind of tapping from the outside and working my way in like that? And so I get this transition like that, where it's a little bit darker on the edge, and then as I move my way in, it's getting drier on this sponge, and thus lighter, so I'm getting this type of thing going on, okay? Darker on the edge. And see how that kind of transitions right there. Dark to light, okay? And that's what's going on in here, dark to light. And again, this is a pretty dark tone, you know, in black. It's the darkest that I'll get to. So yeah, just be careful, you know, to not tone out your lighter elements within the scene. Alright, now I need to rediscover what's going to be up and what's down. I think this is it. I think that's up and this is down. I think. I don't like that one. I don't like that one either. That looks okay too. I think this is my favorite up and down. Even though it's, you know, it's real abstract, you know, but I don't know, for some reason, that's what I always tell people. You just kind of move things around, you know. If one kind of configuration of something doesn't stand out more than the others, then it doesn't matter to you. But I don't know, just go off your kind of gut feeling on something, you know. Some people they hold a stamp up over here and they say, should I use this in there or should I not, you know, or they're like this, okay, should I use this or not? And I'd always just say kind of hold it up next to it. If you're using an unmounted stamp, stamp it out and just kind of I don't know, visually, put it next to it and see if you want to put something there or not. I don't know, It's always just a matter of kind of playing around and, I don't know, it's just seeing if something stands out to you, you kind of have to go off your instincts and some, some decision making, go at what stands out best to you. And like I said, if nothing stands out more than the other, then it probably doesn't matter, about where you place something specifically. Alright, now this is in need of some things. I need some other types of effects in here, but I think what I'm going to do at this point in time, I think I'm going to stamp my imagery in here. Then again, I'm going to do it with the VersaFine. The VersaFine stays wet on here a long time, so gosh, maybe I do need to do the background stuff first. Okay, what I was going to do, notice how there's a lot of similar textures in here, okay, right? Even the finest of textures, all that little splatter painting in here. See it around here? All down there. It's very similar, alright? Now, I've gone in at times before and I've used a white gel pen. I don't know, let me test this. Sometimes that looks pretty good. Sometimes when I've gone on and I've started to put little dots around on things with the gel pen after I've done the splatter paint, sometimes that splatter paint, the splatter paint is dry on here, but sometimes it leaves kind of a chalky surface. And if I kind of start using this white gel pen, sometimes it doesn't apply, but I don't know, this one, maybe the white gel pen is, the splatter paint was so fine that it's not kind of clogging this pen, when I use it down here, so. Okay, so all's well. So what I was going to do is I thought I'd have to apply it with some of this paintbrush and, draw a little circle down here. But see, what I'm doing is I'm adding some variation. These larger dots are just with the gel pen. It's not just dotting once. See, if I dot once here, okay, like that, it's that size. But if I want a larger one, I just draw it in there like that. Okay? And I try to make it a little bit varied. Maybe in the lighter areas I can do a larger dot. But this is kind of a way to go back in and introduce a very light element, in a very specific area. And when I say specific, not a planned area, but just something somewhere that I've decided to draw in. Okay, so I get the benefit of the tone behind it, but I get some layering and contrast in an area as well, meaning I can put a light, very light texture in the form of a dot back into an area, so I get the benefit of all those tones in here, all these jeweled tones, but I can still have a white dot, okay? And again, that's why we don't have to be so specific and, about when we're laying on some colors, when we're laying on colors in there. I can go back in with something like this and reintroduce that little stark little, star in there. So see, I don't know, to me that's looking a little more textural and deep in terms of visual depth by having this dot in here, or dots, okay? So what we're doing is we're going for kind of a, I don't know, deep space, in terms of the visuals. And plus adding these little dots in here like this, especially on a background like this with the Milky Way, it's just a lot of fun, doing this type of thing and watching these kind of layers of depth kind of appear. This is a fluorescent pink. I was wondering if this is Signo. Yeah, Uniball Signo. 0.7. I take it millimeter in terms of the width. Let me see if I can get that on there. I'm not sure. Oh, that's kind of interesting. This is making a darker dot. I thought it would be a much lighter one, but it's actually kind of a fairly dark dot. And this little flag on here, I realize this is my son probably drew that when he was 2 or 3. And probably he was using this as a flag for something he was making. That being said, the Signo pen's working pretty good still, isn't it? A lot of the times these pens get kind of old and they kind of clog. Or they just kind of dry and they don't draw anymore. But anyways, okay, so I'm going in. This kind of fluorescent pink is somewhat reminiscent of that magenta color that I laid down on there. So it's kind of all part of the color scheme in some way. Let me see if I can hold this up so you can see what I'm doing here. It's very subtle. See all those little dots like that? There, you know? That's what it looks like up close. Okay? But when we took a look at the overall, you know, we're not looking at those dots specifically, but I think it adds to the overall kind of color statement that this is all going to be a part of. And one of the things about this scene too, because of all this texture and different colors of texture, when I spray this, and I love to spray these scenes off, I think this scene will look even deeper in terms of kind of the visual depth and kind of what's going on in the scene. Okay. I usually don't take this Milky Way this far with all these different marks. I especially in a video like this, you know, I don't know how, you know, kind of visually engaging it is to watch someone lay down, you know, 1,000 little, you know, pinhole-sized dots on a background, but I don't know. This video, I guess, is about kind of taking something to the, I don't know, maximum amount of resolution, you know, that, you know, a stamp design can possibly go to, because this is kind of it's, you know, what I'm going for is it's kind of an extension of, you know, these little dots in here are kind of an extension of what's going on in the design, you know, the Milky Way stamps. So I really want to see how far I can take this. Okay, see that? You can see it looks like, I don't know, it looks like the scene's got a case of chicken pox or something like that. But that's when you look at it really up close, you can see all that. But this is like arm's distance or something like that. Okay. Alright. Now, let's go to the green. I really need to get some more pens. I love paint pens and iridescent pens, and Metallics, I love metallic pens a lot. Which a lot of things I don't even know about. But at one point in time, I took a look at all these papers. I've mentioned this in some other video, but you know, when I go to the paper store or something like that, I'll pick up a pack or something like that. And sometimes I don't use it for a while. Sometimes I don't use it for a long while, but you know, I took a look at my papers and suddenly I realized that 80% of them are kind of iridescent or something like that. Which kind of surprised me, because I'm not necessarily someone that's too much into, like, glitter. Some of it, sometimes I am. But iridescent things, I seem to be... And that's the same thing with, like, pens. When I see, like, a cool-looking metallic pen or something like that. Gold, silver, of course. I need to see if there's some copper or something like that. This one here is the Aqua, or Turquoise, Sharpie paint pen. And I was mentioning to someone the other night, I need to get some more of those. I really love these pens. Okay, man, that's looking pretty crazy, but that was the kind of the entire point. All right, now I had these pens, these Jelly Roll Moonlight pens. It's by the brand Sakura. Okay, luminous gel ink. Glows under black light, right? I don't know. I mean, that's not why I bought them, but I thought they might be kind of cool. All right, this looks like it's even a lighter pink. From the look of it, there wouldn't be too much doubt in my mind about it glowing under a black light. Be kind of cool, though. Do some scenes that kind of are meant to, you know, be seen under a black light. Maybe we'll try that sometime. Okay. Alright. Now this whole chicken pocky looking surface is looking a little bit crazy to me, but that's kind of the idea. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over it with yet another layer of some white here, just to kind of, believe it or not, mellow out some of that those colored dots a little bit. Like I said, I want this to be like a real jeweled looking surface. It's kind of like, I don't know if it's so much jewel as much as it looks kind of like candy to me or something. Alright, I need so many dots, my camera just ran out of battery, so luckily I have a backup battery. If any of you have that kind of Copic marker system where you use it kind of like an airbrush, that would be a really good tool to use, you know, in terms of toning a lot of this in the background. Okay, this looks like space confetti or something. Okay. Man, that is nuts. Let me show you what this looks like up close. Million stars, huh? Okay. Alright, let's see what this looks like here. When we get our subject matter. Well, the background's the subject matter, but which way was up and which way was down? I think I was doing it that way. Well, let's see. Let me take a look. No, that's up and that's down. I want more of that green up there. Alright, wow. That is nuts. Alright, this is the Spruce Large. Spruce Tree Large. And this is a VersaFine Black. It says instant dry, but not on this paper. And it's pigmenting, so it's just, you know, it's going to be thicker than dye-based ink. So it's kind of interesting to have it centered like that, huh? Okay, so that. I'll put it down like this, I think. Okay. And we'll try the pine tree. Just for a little bit of variation in terms of the visual weight. It's kind of more spindly. Kind of a mixed, you know, mixed forest. Okay. Just kind of going more for the tip of it. Put another one straight over at the top of that other spruce on the side here. It's one of the nice things about scenic stamping, of course, is that you can use the same stamp several times within a scene, and it doesn't necessarily have to look like the same stamp used several times. Here's what scenic stamping does too. If you use these stamps like this, there's no kind of definitive break between one design and the other. So when someone sees like a finished scene like that, they don't necessarily know if, you use one stamp to just stamp out the whole thing. And you really can't tell where one stamp, where you started the scene and how you finished it. What came first, in other words. But in reality, I mean, this could be a two-stamp scene. I don't have to use two different forms of, the tree in the foreground here. I could have used just one of them, multiple times. But this could be a two-stamp scene. And I think it makes for a pretty dramatic, visual. And it's just basically two stamps. It's a heck of a lot of little dots, but, most people have like gel pens or something like that in their repertoire. They have, different colors of ink pads, to lay down, and you have some kind of forms of sponging. You can just sponge in some colors or whatever. You can come up with a pretty dramatic looking, end result with really just very minimal quantities of stamps. Okay, now let's see here. This is what I'm looking at here. I want to go a little bit darker in the corner again. Okay. And just because, and I say that because the bottom got quite heavy with the use of those tree images. So see, I'm just kind of putting on a little bit of a stronger top on that. I don't know, don't you feel that kind of contains the scene a little bit more? Okay. You don't have to use a huge amount of it, but just, a little bit darker up there. Okay. Right and left corners. I can go to the bottom left and right corner too, just to kind of frame it, but there's no way I'm going to go over that area down there. Those trees are wet. Alright, now, here's what I'm thinking here. I think I can put... I'm not sure if I want to. I was thinking about putting some little highlights on some of these trees, but you can't do it with the gel pen at this point in time because I don't know if you can see that these trees are super. Yeah, see how wet that is there? You can see how wet that is. These trees, but I was thinking I might be able to do it with a paintbrush here and some of that bleed-proof white. And this is something I almost never do. I think I did it in the Startering paper scene, but this is quite a different technique. The Startering paper scene is quite a different application because the Startering paper doesn't stick, but let's see what this looks like here. Like I said, these trees are pretty wet still, so... Okay, this is what I'm doing here, if you can't see. See those little highlights on that tree branch? I'm not doing too much, because, like I said, that page is really, really wet down there. Those impressions are really wet. But, I don't know, see if I can get something down there. I mean, I could wait till this scene dries a little bit, but I'm like any of you know what I mean? I don't feel like, when we're working on our scenes or something like that, or making something, I don't know, do we necessarily, we don't necessarily feel like waiting around for something to dry for like a couple hours, right? And I'm no different. Even though this is a video, I don't know. What you get in these scenes is, or in these videos is, what you see is what you get. This is the way I work, so. Okay. I'm not much of a painter, by the way. My son asked me if I ever paint, and I said hardly ever. I hardly ever do anything with a brush. Okay. We have these highlights. Can you see that? Some of those white highlights on some of those branches in there. And I put them on the inside of the tree there. Because the lighting in the scene is kind of more centralized, right? It's coming from above. So on this side of the scene, I'll put the highlights, most of the highlights on this side of that, the left side of the tree. Okay, because the light is, for the most part, it's on the left side of this tree. On this tree, most lighting is on the right side, and above too, but, kind of reiterating that lighting scheme. Okay. I guess there's something to be said for the paintbrush, in terms of kind of achieving a little bit more of a kind of a random stroke than just always going with something like the gel pen, which just gives you a very definitive, little dot in some areas. There's something to be said for having a little bit more variation in the marks that you're making. Well, I like what I'm seeing. I know I'm working this upside down, but that's the way I can kind of get to some of these branches, without getting my kind of hand in some of that wet pigment ink. Okay, here we go. This needs something in here, doesn't it? It's real blobby. I'll put some little highlights, maybe. Okay, like that. Okay, I think that I was gonna say. I think that should do it. Then what happens? I look into the camera, the back of the the screen on the back of my camera here, and I think, oh, there's a kind of a big blobby area down there that I can use some, it can use a little help in terms of some variation. Okay, let's take a look and see what this looks like. I've done other scenes like this before, using some trees and, night sky or whatever, but again, maybe not quite in the extreme as this one. Okay. I noticed some of my white gel pen marks are a little bit more translucent. They might have picked up some of the color underneath, so I'll go with some of this opaque white. And I'll add this in here. Plus it'll be a little bit more textural. Alright, while I'm at this, I should note here that kind of my instinct is to stop. Or was to stop a long time ago, but I want this to be a little bit more extreme. Sometimes when you take things a little bit further, or you break out of a kind of a pattern of habit, sometimes it can open up new doors for you in terms of just different possibilities. I'm not saying that this one will, but for me, but it could. I might see something different. Like, I'm finding that I kind of like working around with this paintbrush to apply this texture in the background. I don't know, it's a good tool, I'm finding, just for a little bit more of a random, varied mark, that paintbrush can provide. And I'm getting a little bit more comfortable with it too through the course of this scene. Okay, I think that should do it. What I should call this, I have no idea. It's either like confetti sky or just dots, maybe. And there's a lot of them. You know, this is full of texture and layers of texture and layer upon layer of color, and it's kind of extreme. I'm looking at these trees here, and these trees are something that I just haven't done before, just in terms of the quantity of ink. A little bit, you know, in that startering paper, but I don't know, I was finding that even kind of a random application of it, it looks pretty good. It's almost like you can kind of do almost anything you want with that paint. You wouldn't do a huge blob in there, but I don't know, I think the trees look more, I don't know, they look more three-dimensional, I think, now with those highlights in there. I mean, I thought it looked good with the, you know, the silhouette, just a flat silhouette background in there too of the trees, you know, and, you know, leaving, you know, kind of the more dimensional stuff going on in the sky, but I think the trees look okay like that. Looks like they're a little, you know, somewhat illuminated by the, you know, what's going on in the night sky. I think it looks okay. And take a look at the sky here. It's very, very textured, even for me. Yeah, there we go. You see all those colored dots in there. So, I don't know, just kind of taking something to the extreme here a little bit. Experimenting around with some different looks and layers and whatnot. What do we use? That little mushy, that's what my son called these little faces here, mushies. Pink pen. We used some of the paint pens from the Sharpies, jelly rolls. I'm sure you have some kind of different pens in your kit there at home. Not to take a super long video full of applying dots and make it even longer, but this is a metallic gold gel pen. Kind of fun. So, I don't know what this scene was kind of about. Maybe it was about these pens now that I kind of lay them out like that. It's probably just more about them than anything else in terms of creating a texture in the background. And there is a lot of texture, and there's a lot of texture in those trees. I think it might be kind of interesting to spray this off, and I'll do that tomorrow after that black sets up a little bit more. But it's a pretty fun scene. I love textures. and that's about as textural a scene as I've probably achieved in the past. But I don't know. I don't know where that'll take me. I think I like that little brush a lot in terms of a kind of a varied mark, and I'll use that again. I think I said that in another recent video, but I kind of forgot. So that little paintbrush there is fun with the bleed-proof white. If you don't have a bottle of bleed-proof white, I don't know. For me, it's a really kind of a nice addition to some of the things you might want to do in a scene if you're into highlights and things like that. And you probably have little paintbrushes in your art box, so I don't know. I'd recommend trying it out. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the scene. I had a lot of fun with it. It's probably a little bit less varied in terms of colors than what I was thinking about, but sometimes you just gotta let a scene go in the direction that it seems to want to go at some point in time, and you just try to maximize the direction that it seems to be leading you in. And I don't know, I guess that's what happened to this one. So anyways, thanks again for watching, and hope you enjoyed. I don't know, I don't like this. I don't like the title Dots. It's probably Confetti Night, Confetti Sky. I don't know, I'll try to come up with something. Alright, thanks so much.